Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zoomtopia 2022. My name is Elisa Levette, and I'm a developer advocate here at Zoom. And I'm very, very happy to be having this conversation with my friends from Twine. I will let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Brandon Catcher, the CTO here at Twine.
I'm Austin. I'm an engineer here at Twine.
And I'm Oliver, also a software engineer at Twine.
Thank you so much for joining me again. And well, here is like what our agenda for today will look like. We're going to talk about what is Twine for Zoom. We're also going to talk about how the developers from Twine built this app, why they decided to build with Zoom. We're also going to go over Twine Zoom app architecture. We're going to talk about development practices and what is next for Twine. But before I get into more details, let me show you what Twine is with this video.
Twine for Zoom allows you to reimagine how you set up and run Zoom breakouts. Our new innovative product allows you to apply different types of matchmaking right inside of your Zoom meeting or event. Hosts simply select a matchmaking mode, set how many guests should be placed into each room, and determine how long the conversations should be. Participants are then automatically sorted into timed back-to-back breakout room sessions, complete with conversation starters, activities, to-do lists, and chatting functionality. Once the timer runs out, participants are placed into their next conversation automatically. Our tag-based and A/B matchmaking modes allow hosts to match participants based on tags or attributes that they determine. Match mentors with mentees, new hires with executives, or professors with students. Attendees then select their tags and are automatically sorted into breakout rooms based on the criteria set by the host. Twine for Zoom's map mode allows attendees to move in and out of their desired breakout rooms by joining a themed table. Hosts can name the tables based on topics, interests, or departments. Once in a breakout, participants can stay as long as they like before moving to another table on the map. Setup for Twine for Zoom takes less than a minute. Simply download the app from the Zoom Apps Marketplace and invite the meeting participants. For even quicker room setup, hosts can utilize our pre-made templates, such as speed networking or mentor-mentee matching, that take one click to set up. If you're ready to reimagine how Zoom breakout rooms can be used for your event or meeting, simply head to the Zoom Apps Marketplace and download Twine for Zoom for free.
All right. I really like how Twine is helping so many teams to manage breakout rooms in a more efficient way, in a friendly way, making all the video experience an easier experience and leading to better interactions. I am a big fan of Twine, and I can say that it does make you feel like when you're in this breakout room experience, it makes you feel like you're bumping into your coworkers. So that is an amazing experience for me. But I don't want to continue talking about Twine. I would let it to my friends from Twine. So if you can kick us up here, Brandon, and tell us, what is Twine? How Twine for Zoom was born?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, a couple years old at this point. Thanks, Lisa. At Twine, so we create online experiences based on breakout rooms. Our small company is about a couple years old, and we have a web application that predates the Zoom app platform, and especially the breakout room APIs. Our web app uses our matchmaking engine to run dynamic breakout rooms outside of the Zoom breakout rooms. And that brings us today where the story here today is the challenge that we initially faced when creating experiences for most of our event organizers that used Zoom to start their events. So when something like this, event organizers would throw an event, say it's a onboarding event or something of the nature, and they would invite everyone to a Zoom room. In the Zoom meeting, they would then eventually, after explaining the experience, would copy and paste a link from our website into the Zoom chat. They would direct participants to click on that link. And once they did, they would be taken to a new website in a browser where they would log in, have a breakout room experience, and eventually that experience would end and it'd be directed back to Zoom. Now, that's a lot. There's plenty of pain points in that whole situation. For one, it's confusing to even find the chat window in Zoom sometimes. Logging into a separate app in the middle of your event is a pretty painful experience. Asking users to come back to the Zoom meeting when they're done was another challenge. Even certain hardware profiles, say Windows machines, had trouble sharing the mic and webcam between the Zoom client and our browser. There was plenty more. And while we were able to give our event organizers instructions to get around these challenges, when we heard about the Zoom app platform and the SDKs for breakout rooms, we saw a huge opportunity. And as of today, using the new Zoom app platforms and APIs, we've been able to completely overcome these challenges, create a seamless experience, and also open up some new opportunities for ourselves.
Thank you, Brandon. You were talking about having some problems when trying to deliver this experience. So how did building a Zoom app actually solve those problems for you?
Yeah, the Zoom app platform and SDK is everything here. So first, I think it's important to emphasize what the value that Twine as a company is trying to provide. We want to virtually connect individuals in a way that's engaging and meaningful. We believe small conversations in breakout rooms are the way to do it. And we use our matchmaking engine to provide the interesting kind of combinations and unique paths for people through a breakout experience. Now, from an engineering perspective, it's also important to state what you don't want to do when building something. We didn't want to build a video conference infrastructure. That problem is pretty solved. Zoom is a household name. Most people have the client installed on their machines already. We don't want to duplicate such a large and comprehensive piece of infrastructure. However, that's actually what we do. We have our own infrastructure because, as I mentioned, our application predates the Zoom app marketplace by a couple of years. And it's not a general purpose video conferencing infrastructure. It's just for breakout rooms. But now with the Zoom app APIs, it's completely different. Where a host can, in just a few clicks and a little bit of configuration, whisk every participant in a meeting away to a breakout room without even the participant opening up our app. It's pretty seamless. We can use the Zoom app context to understand a participant's profile so they don't have to re-enter their information again, like their name or their title. And most of all, no one ever leaves Zoom. They never have to open up a new app. The experience is smooth and I think very compelling. Add on top of this, a Zoom app is essentially a web app. So we were able to use our existing stack to get a complex app up and running pretty quickly.
I see that. Being familiar with the stack, I think it was a very important thing for you guys to be able to build with the Zoom App SDK. You mentioned that building a Zoom app is basically building a web app, right? Can you tell us more about how can you say this and why is it like easy in a way to build a Zoom app?
Yeah, so when Zoom was putting together their app platform, I guess they made a decision that was very good and like very helpful to probably most developers who would be interested in developing on Zoom apps, and that they didn't develop like a new language. There's no like special technologies you work with. It like really is just a web app. So we can use React, we can use Node or Express or whatever on the back end, all these technologies that we're already very familiar with. All of the tooling still there. We can like open our Zoom app, pop open the web inspector, look at logs, look at like any debugging information we want, and just like all of our deployment strategies and everything, like it's all very familiar, all feels very good, all of our creature comforts are there. So that just like made it very easy for us to get up and running as developers, where we weren't like fighting a new programming language or like some new esoteric like platform. It's just a web app, but it's right there embedded into the Zoom client. Like overall, it's a really easy way to like make an app and like provide a lot of value to customers.
Right, thank you, Austin. Brandon mentioned earlier that for you, it was compelling to build a Zoom app, right? To build Twine for Zoom. Why would you say building this Twine for Zoom app was compelling?
Yeah, so like Brandon was mentioning, there's a lot of like complexity that Zoom kind of handles for us. Like we don't have to worry about like WebRTC or like paying for other like video providers or anything. It's like people are just on their Zoom meeting already. They're not leaving anywhere. It's just a very seamless, smooth experience for clients. And like they don't have to worry about like fiddling with other things. And then the Zoom SDK is like very powerful and like unlocks a lot of new experiences that like kind of weren't possible in a Zoom meeting before. Like as Brandon was mentioning, we don't have to redirect people to like some external web app and like have them input information. Like, we can just access, hey, we see your screen name. We can just like grab that, use it, and like facilitate people without them like really having to think about it. It's just super smooth, very seamless, and just like provides a much better experience.
Yeah, for sure. Having the app embedded in the Zoom client, it gives you a lot of value, right? Not losing participants when switching from one breakout room or from the main room to another breakout room. So yeah, I really see that, and thank you for sharing that, Austin. So now really I am more interested about learning more about Twine's architecture, and how did you guys actually use those APIs and the SDKs to build your app?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that one, Elisa. So our application uses JavaScript across the full stack. So as Austin and Brandon were saying, it's literally a web app. But on the front end, we use a single page web app that's using React and TypeScript. And then on the back end, we have an Express app, which is also written in JavaScript using TypeScript. And we communicate between the client and server using a combination of RESTful APIs and WebSockets for any data that we need in real time, such as matchmaking. And then all of our data is just stored on the back end in Redis and RedisGraph, making it really fast to retrieve. And some information about meetings is also stored in MongoDB to be persisted. And then we use NPM for dependency management. And that's where Zoom hosts the Zoom Apps SDK. So to step back a little bit and talk about our architecture and how our app actually works, when our web app loads, all we have to do is initialize the Zoom Apps SDK. So we use the config API for that. And this allows our app to then run in the Zoom client and receive some basic context about the meeting, like who's there and the user, the person that opened the app. And from there, we're effectively ready to facilitate a Twine experience. But there are a lot of APIs and events related to all sorts of features and interactions that already happen in Zoom. But some of the APIs that we use specifically are around like app invitations and like the meeting itself. So like send app invitation to all participants. You can get the meeting join URL so that people can share that. And then of course, the ones that we rely on most heavily that the other guys have spoken about are the breakout room management APIs. So things like create breakout rooms, configure breakout rooms, assigning participants to breakout rooms, and then opening and closing. And we can also open URLs as well. But these basically allow us to automatically, programmatically move people to different rooms for timed conversations. So as a host, if you're using Twine or any Zoom app for that matter, you can effectively get most of the information that you see in front of you. So that is like who's in the meeting, a list of breakout rooms and who's in them, for example. And there are even some apps that are using video streams as well, which are really interesting. But one of our main goals is for everyone in the meeting to be involved in the Twine experience. And so for that, we use a combination of things. There's a feature that Zoom shipped named guest mode that allows everyone to use the app. And we also use the invite APIs so that the host can invite everyone in the meeting to use the app.
Thank you, Oliver. I actually wanted to get there because Brandon mentioned earlier that for Twine, it is very important that every participant can have this Twine experience of the breakout rooms. So like how did you manage to have participants that do not have Zoom installed or are not logged in into Zoom?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, one of the biggest problems that we had when we first created Twine was that hosts were really anxious that not everybody in the meeting could have a Twine experience. But recently Zoom shipped a feature named guest mode. And what it really means is that anybody with a Zoom account can use an app in a guest mode state. So what this means literally is that people can run the app and have an app experience without having the app. So technically it runs in the same context inside a Zoom meeting, but just with a very limited set of scopes. So we don't receive any information about the user. And so we can't really give them a personalized experience, but we can give them an anonymized matchmaking experience. And so we can move them between breakout rooms and display content to them, all without having to install the app. So it's really a game changer for us.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Oliver, for sharing that with us. I now have a question that's more about the way you guys test it. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, I'm a big fan of Twine, and I use it in some of my stand-up meetings with the developer advocacy team meetings. Sometimes we even use it in the developer relations team. But let's say where it's like around 10 to 20 people in those meetings. But let's say in the scenario where we wanted to have a company meeting. So instead of being 20 to 30 people, it would be a meeting of around, I don't know, let's say 800 people. How would you guys manage those usage spikes? How did you test that? How are you able to actually test those usage spikes?
For sure. Yeah, that's a big question and challenge that is really prevalent in like the live event space. You don't really have a very steady usage pattern. It's like we might have a big event and we need to be ready for that, and we need to know like how is the app going to work and like interface with the Zoom SDK during that time. And so we actually developed a way to test this using some other infrastructure that Zoom provides. We're using Puppeteer, and we're pointing like headless Chrome browsers at the Zoom web client. And so by doing that, we're able to like scale up and have as many users as we need and bring in hundreds of like fake Zoom users into a meeting. And then we can use Twine to facilitate them and see like how the app will actually interact with them. And one really nice thing about that is like, these are actual web clients. These are actual users in a Zoom meeting. So when they're getting moved around and facilitated, we have confidence that like, okay, whatever we see here is what we're going to see like in the real world in the field. And so we can go to someone and say like, yeah, we've tested with bots. We brought in hundreds of bots and like, this is how the app worked. And so not only does that give us confidence that the product's going to work, it gives hosts who can get a little anxious about their events that like that same confidence that like, okay, this has been tested and like, this is how things will run. So just in terms of the infrastructure around this, the way we're hosting these like different like headless browsers is we have an AWS ECS like instance, and like we can scale up to like however many we need very easily. It's just essentially a Docker image on a container. So if we want hundreds of bots and we need more headless browsers, we can like bring in more. And what these like images are running is browserless. It's just like it runs a headless Chrome browser for you. You can point Puppeteer to it. We chose to host it ourselves, scale it ourselves. ECS, like the way it's structured and the way you can just bring instances online from an image makes this really simple. And those images just point at or run, I guess, a Zoom client. If you don't want to like host your own browserless, it's too much infrastructure, you don't want to take the time to set this up, it's like alternatives. One thing we looked at was browserless is like hosted service. And that's a perfectly good option as well. You just get a URL, you point your Puppeteer to that as a remote browser, and it'll run seamlessly for you. But there's like lots of different tricks we've learned while developing on Zoom, and like this is one of those things. So what's a good way to test our app?
Thank you, Austin. Now that you shared with us how you actually implemented some of your testing strategies, and you talked a little bit more about the infrastructure of Twine, if someone here in the audience wants to build a Zoom app, there's anything as a team that you want to share with those developers that really want to get started with building Zoom apps using our Zoom SDKs and APIs?
Yeah, I'd love to take this question because, well, I think the documentation is quite good, and everyone should read it over once or twice. I think there's two things that I'd like to promote to just make the start pretty easy. So the two things are, one, don't be afraid to create a lot of apps and get used to it, in fact. And two, use a tool called Ngrok, which we'll get to in a second. So we have a ton of unpublished apps internally. We have an app for basically each environment we have. Production is published, but then we have our stage and dev app. And most importantly, every engineer on the team has their own local app. And once you build a single app, you'll see how kind of quick and easy it is to get a new one up and running. I pretty much build a new app every single time I want to run an experiment with a new Zoom app SDK API that's coming out or something of the nature. It's a really common experience. So I would say make a few, see how it goes, get very used to it. But this brings me back to Ngrok. So running a Zoom app locally is maybe the only tricky difference between a normal web app and a Zoom app. The reason for that is that the Zoom app marketplace requires you to put a public-facing URL that's secure into some configuration on the Zoom marketplace website in order for you to even start working with your app locally. And that's where Ngrok can be extremely useful. So I've been using this tool for a few years now, and I basically take it to every job and project I have. What it essentially does is give you, with a few short commands, a secure URL that can be used to point to your machine from any other machine on the internet. As you can see in the graphic, it'll give you a subdomain for ngrok.io and point it at any port. I have here port 8080 for demonstration, but any port on your machine, and you can have multiple ports exposed. And in this way, you can now have a URL that anyone in the world can use to access your local environment. And you can use that URL to add to the Zoom app marketplace configuration so that you can get up and running with a local app really quickly. Now, this is no small thing, to be honest. Usually to get a domain and a certificate that's actually trusted by the certificate authorities, there's a lot of effort there, there's a lot of work there. But with Ngrok and basically a few commands, you can get a new engineer up and running in a matter of minutes. So there's a lot to learn to get up and running in the Zoom app marketplace. But I think these two should get you started pretty easily.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I really liked how you said that developers shouldn't be afraid or scared of just creating a lot of apps. There's no limit on the Zoom app applications that a developer can create in their environment to get started and to start just testing and playing around with the SDKs and the APIs. I think that's very valuable. And also, well, we here at Zoom also use Ngrok for some of our testing environments. So I think you're spot on that. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I would like you guys to give me a little bit of insights on what's next for Twine.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we want to do, and we're really just getting started. One of the things that we've talked about earlier was scale. We already support hundreds of users in a meeting. We want to go way larger than that. We want to be able to support the largest all hands meetings from the largest distributed enterprise corporations in the world. Zoom already does that, and we want our app to be able to manage breakout rooms for thousands of people. And not just all hands, but virtual events too. Like it's, there's a lot of exciting new experiences that we can make for a very large scale that actually might not have existed in a real event in general. Furthermore, we want to really build on our matchmaking engine and modes. There's so many different experiments we want to try, and we have about 4 different distinct matchmaking modes at the moment, but we want to add different configurations and interesting new engaging experiences based on matching people to people they want to meet or people they have never met before, and different ways to make the breakout experience something very unique. Beyond that, of course, we want to give people an idea of like how well are these matchmaking sessions running? How useful are they? And why they should continue to do more of them through analytics and reporting. I guess finally, the Zoom App SDK is constantly adding new APIs and new capabilities to those APIs. So we're constantly keeping an eye out for the new ones coming down the pipe, because we think there'll definitely be more that can expand our company's landscape for opportunity.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm very excited to see what's next for Twine. I'll just keep an eye on your application. And Oliver, Austin, and Brandon, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, for taking the time to talk to me and talk to everyone here about how you build Twine for Zoom, all the amazing tips that you shared with us. And just to wrap up this conversation, I just want to encourage everyone here in the audience to head to the Zoom Marketplace and install Twine for Zoom. It's an amazing Zoom app that gives you a very easy and friendly experience on breakout rooms and speed networking. I highly recommend it. And thank you again for joining us in this session. If there's anything else you guys want to add, please feel free.
Oh, just thank you so much, Elisa, for giving us an opportunity to speak to the Zoom app developer community. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you.